Talking today is a recording in progress. Got it. What I'm going to be talking about today is some thoughts that I have about kind of how we can get more out of the experiences and adventures and the romps that we have in nature. And as I get older, the more I realize that this opportunity that we have to be alive and sentient and making the most of this, it's just precious short. It's incredibly short. And as my hairs get grayer, the more, and my kids get taller, the more I realize just sort of the ephemerality of all of this, and myself too. And so when I'm out in nature, how do I make the most of those experiences? And I've got some thoughts that I wanted to share with you today about establishing a deeper connection with the natural world. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but then at the end of this, I'd love for us to kind of come into the conversation about it. So if there are any ideas here that I speak about that kind of get you thinking about something else, that gets you thinking about whatever ideas come to you, I want to encourage you to write those down. Have a little notepad and kind of write those thoughts down, because what happens if we don't write them down is then we tend to forget them. And then you're like, I had a thought. I have no idea what it was. I want to share some thoughts for you. And then I'd love to encourage you to play with some of these on some of your next rambles in the woods. And so what I'm going to do is, hi, it's me down in the corner, is we're going to be talking a little bit about birding, kind of a little bit about why and the how we do it, and some things that we can do that I think that will just make this whole process a lot more fun, and how we can make more of this chance that we have to be alive. So these are the kind of some of the ideas that I want to explore. So one is this, we're going to be looking at beauty. We're going to be talking a little bit about bird identification. Surprise, surprise, at an Audubon meeting, we'll be talking about bird identification. I've got some interesting thoughts about that, about behavior, song, science, and the process of keeping a journal. And I think all of these have nested within them some ideas that we can use to make our nature rambling and discovery even more engaging. So let's take a look at this idea of beauty. And what I find is that if I am focused on, like, getting a big list, like who's that, I sometimes, or actually surprisingly often, I have to remind myself just to slow down and take in how beautiful this moment is, or how beautiful this species is. And what I will often do is, at the start of a birding adventure, I've got kind of an analytic mind. I kind of tend to go off on these sort of scientific tangents, but I find it's really, really helpful for me at the start of a sort of day of birding is just to stand there with my feet on the ground, and I will just try to clear my brain with just taking some intentional breaths. So just breathing in and feeling the air kind of come into my lungs as I breathe in, and breathing out. And at first, this sounds like a real hippie thing. But actually, this breathing approach before you do anything that requires focus, this is a technique that's trained from emergency room doctors to British commandos. This idea of if you really want to be present doing whatever you're doing, start just with being aware of your breath coming in and your breath going out, and do that for a few cycles of breath. And what I find is just on the other side of that, my head is clearer and I'm a little bit more in the moment. So if I've been driving along a road trying to kind of keep track of directions, getting to some place, and or listening to the radio and thinking about, you know, the politics du jour, right? I might get out with the car with all this, you know, tension in my head. So, but starting with that breathing is really, really useful. And then what I do is when I'm out there in nature, I'm intentionally looking for what is beautiful. What is beautiful? So as a scientist, I am intentionally looking for what is beautiful here. And what I'm trying to do is to get my brain to accept a lower and lower and lower level of beauty. So initially, like if there's a sunset with a golden eagle flying past it and a rainbow and maybe some whales jumping, we're like, oh, ooh, it's beautiful. Throw in a waterfall, right? But the idea here is that, you know, a little brown thrush pops up in front of you. And if you can get yourself to look at this thing and say to yourself, wow, that is beautiful, that is exquisite. Just look at those soft browns, those blends, that, you know, that dappled breast, whatever it is, to get yourself to celebrate that. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to lower our threshold of kind of what makes us kind of go, oh. Kind of a good way of practicing this is what I call the beauty break. And so what I'll do is, as I'm hiking along with naturalist friends, what I do is, well, anyone in the group can call it. We'll say, stop, okay, beauty break. And what you do is you look around, and in that moment, you try to just sort of with your hands find and frame some little moment around you that is exquisitely beautiful. And it could be just like right over there if you look right there, and then you share that with somebody else. There's one of my favorite poems by the poet Mary Oliver. It's just 3 lines. And the poem is called Instructions for Living Life. And so the poem goes like this. She says, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. Right? And so what you do is you just look around and you find some little moment of beauty, and then you share that with somebody else. And what this does is it just helps us realize that there is beauty all around us all the time. And when we're going out bird watching and spending time in the outdoors, we are surrounded by this beauty. So when I go out, part of my practice is to intentionally invite that in and deliberately notice lower and lower levels of beauty. And when I find these, I get myself to celebrate them. You share that with somebody else, and that's a celebration. And what it does is it just makes the path that you're on even more wonderful and exquisite. You can do this anytime. So for me, that's becoming more and more a part of my practice of beauty, of practice of birding. I go out and I'm looking for beauty. And when I intentionally do that, I find that the world is filled with more beauty. So I want to invite you to give that a try, and just try that on and see what it's like to be deliberate about finding that beauty. So that's one of my first step. And this is accessible to anybody at any level of birding experience. So let's take a look at what else we can do. And since we're here in with bird friends, actually, here's just sort of a moment of beauty, right? So when there is a species that is really, really gaudy, right, we train ourselves to go like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And we can recognize the beauty in this hummingbird. Really, really easy to do. That's easy because it's got bright colors. They're clear, crisp colors. And it's also something that's novel to us. And so as a species, we tend to orient towards things that are novel. So we tend to kind of appreciate anything that is new. right? But here's my challenge for you. I'm going to put up a video of a bird. And it's a bird that you have seen before. This is not a video that is picked because it is particularly exquisitely beautiful or spectacular. I picked this video because it is ordinary. And my challenge for you, as you look at this bird that you've seen before, is to notice something wonderful about it. To notice something wonderful about this bird and see if you can do that. Let's just take a look at it. And for me, because I've looked at this video several times, I'm going to challenge myself to notice something wonderful about it that I've never noticed before in other times I've looked at this exact same video. All right, let's give this a try. There's our bird. I found three things. So I've looked at this video before, and for me, I found myself sort of falling in love with three different things. One was its nictitating membrane. I haven't noticed that before, but when I was making those little vocalizations, this little nictitating membrane would come boing, boing, across its eye. And I also was really enjoying like the contrast on that eye, how that light eye against that dark background, and as it would turn its head, it seemed that the light would always kind of keep a little bit of a dark framing around that. And then it was also just sort of the geometries of when it would have front towards you, side, or turn its head a little bit away from you, how that sort of iridescent purple part on the head, and I love that little purple, that would kind of take different places. So what I'm trying to do is just get myself to notice something new, something different, and something to help me just fall more deeply in love with a brewer's blackbird. And if you can do this with a brewer's blackbird, you can do this with anything. So if you are with somebody else right now and you're watching this together, share with them what it is that you noticed. And also, you can write into the chat if you are watching this alone. I want to encourage you just to put into the chat something that you noticed of blackbird appreciation. Again, we want to train ourselves to be deliberately celebrating all these little things that pop up around us. Now, if you can do this with brewer's blackbird, the whole world around you is going to become more wonderful. So it's just an invitation to take what you think you know and don't kind of like, okay, there's a brewer's. Let's see if there's anything good here, right? How can, like, okay, Kim writes in the wonderful shine and iridescence. Right. Judy writes in, love the way the breeze fluttered its feathers. That green fringy color, feathers fluffed out in the wind, how alert it is. Also, Diane describes it, this is not just a blackbird, right? So this kind of appreciation of, can we make Can we see what is exquisite and new to us in even the common things? There's beauty there waiting for us. Oh, Lauren was enjoying the way that how when it would do those vocalizations, how the plumage would change. So what you want to do if you're out with other people and you notice something like this, share it. Again, remember those 3 parts of Mary Oliver's poem, Instructions for Living a Life. It's also instructions for better bird watching, because you share like get people around you to notice, like, when it does that. You see that when it fluffs, like, look at what happens to that, and celebrate it together. Goethe said that a joy shared is a joy doubled. So let's get our multiplying effects out there and share those observations with each other. As you notice something special, let somebody else know. So now let's talk a little bit about bird ID. Because sometimes when we're birding, you get the feeling that the goal of birding is to identify everything you see. And identifying birds can be really, really, really fun. So I write identification books. I'm not somebody who's I'm not anti-identification. I think identifying things is fun. But what I want to encourage people to do is that when the bird pops up in front of you, don't immediately reach for your book. Because you see, the names of these things are just things that, to get the American Ornithological Union's latest name kind of tagged onto something is not as important as paying attention to this thing that has popped up. Here's this living thing in front of you. It's this little wonderful ball of life covered with feathers. And what we want to do is spend time at the start really paying attention to that bird. So rather than having our nose in an app or our nose in a book, we want to have our eyes on the bird. And an interesting thing happens to us when we start looking at anything. Your brain will quickly say to you, you know what, buddy? I think I've pretty much got this, right? You don't need to pay attention to this anymore, because what your brain has done is essentially a resource assessment. Here's what your brain does, is it first looks at this new thing and it says, right, can it eat me? And then it goes, can I eat it? And once you've got this sort of basic level of whether or not this thing is a resource, there's a low brainstem part of your brain there that goes like, okay, let's go on to the next thing. And you may have seen this happen with birders, where everybody will be like, oh my gosh, that's wonderful, that's beautiful, look at that, look at those colors, oh, it's a gorgeous, what a wonderful thing. And then somebody says, oh wow, yeah, that's a lazuli bunting. And everybody goes, oh, that's so cool, that's great. Okay, now what's this over here? Right? So like, once we get this name attached to this thing, there's part of our brain that will say, okay, we've got it, let's bounce. But there's actually so much more that you can do with this encounter with this little puffball of life. Naming it is just one. And the names are things that human beings made up. So first, value looking at the bird. You may have seen a robin before, but have you ever seen this robin? Have you ever seen this robin on this day at this temperature? Because there's actually something special going on right now. And if we know how to pay attention to that, the world will share its wonders with us. And one good way to kind of shut off that part of your brain that says to you, okay, now let's bounce to the next thing, is that as you're watching the bird, start to quietly say out loud whatever features you notice about it. Now, in some circles, this is almost a no-no, because when I first learned about birding, the idea was like everybody had their lips zipped. Everyone was totally quiet. And if you talking really bugs somebody near you, don't bug them, right? We don't want to bug other people. But here's an interesting thing about your brain. If you quietly say out loud the features that you notice about a bird, your brain will retain more information. Otherwise, what happens is your brain gets into what's called a rumination loop. You'll be staring at the bird, and the bird's just staring back, but your brain is not actively processing and recording more information. You have the subjective feeling that your brain is really engaging with whatever is in front of you. They've done these experiments where they have people look at paintings in an art gallery. And they say, we want you to really study this, really pay attention to it. And people will be like, and they're looking at it, and they're looking at it, and they're looking at it, right? And then what they say is, okay, when you were looking at this, were you really looking intently at this? Were you studying the whole thing? People will report their subjective experience is that they were really closely studying this painting. But if you put a helmet on them that tracks their eyeball movements, what we find is that there are maybe 5 different points in the painting that they look at. And what happens is they start looking at one, then another, then another, then another, then another. Then they go back to that thing that they already noticed and they look at it, and then their brain just starts following this loop. And your brain does this because it's easier than paying attention. Paying attention actually has a cost. Paying attention, right? The cost of paying attention is actually really, really great. Your brain is about 2% of your body weight on an average adult human being, 2% of your body weight. Check this out. It uses 20% of all the calories you consume. That's a really high cost. It's expensive. So when you're trying to pay attention, your brain is burning calories, and it's hard. So if your brain has a way of shutting that off and just kind of going into a rumination loop, it will. So what will happen is the bird will be in front of you, and then the bird will fly away. And then people like, and you'll remember just a couple of things about it. But if you do this trick, then you're going to find that your brain keeps much more information. We're going to test that in just a moment. Before we do, just a couple of other thoughts. One is that any level of identification that you feel comfortable with is good. So you don't have to get things to species level. If you can look at something and say, this is a wood warbler, that's great. You don't have to go all the way to species or subspecies. Like if you're looking at crossbills, like there are some people out there who are identifying subspecies of crossbills. That's crazy, right? Yeah, there are some people out there, they can identify Impidinax flycatchers. Wow, right? For most mortals, we're lucky if we can kind of go like, hey, there's the crossbill. So a little bit of challenge is fun, but don't freak yourself out. Don't compare yourself to people who have been birding their entire lives. And you're coming to this and they're like, there's this subspecies of this crossbill. And just enjoy whatever level you're at. And know that by continuing to do this, you're going to get better and better and better and better at it. And it's a skill that will come with practice. But at the start, like all those little brown female ducks, they just look like little brown blobs. But then you keep looking at those, and there's going to be a point where like, oh, that's the female pintail. And then like the female gadwall, right? That's like, oh, that's how you look. You see that sometimes they'll like be paired together, the male and the female, like, that's you, right? So just whatever level of bird identification skill you are at, have fun doing that. And don't feel that like if you were a real hardcore birder, you'd be doing subspecies of crossbills. And if you're not there, you're not doing birding. Just enjoy whichever. So what you want to do is just sort of make it a little bit of a challenge for yourself. So if you feel like identifying these things is easy, all right, go for subspecies. And see if you can find, but what you don't want to do is push it so far that you're kind of making it kind of an angst-ridden experience. All right, now here's where we're going to test this idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video of another bird. And I'm going to ask you to do something weird. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to talk out loud to the bird and just say, I noticed this about you and this about you and this about you, and to say out loud all the different things that you notice about the bird. And if you think you've said everything, right, then just go for an even more refined level of observations. Like you've mentioned maybe the color of the beak. Now go for the shape of the beak. What is the shape of the top part of the beak? The shape of the lower part of the beak? Basically, the idea here is if you see something, say something. If you see something, say something. This works for airport security. This works for birding. We're taking advantage of something that psychologists call the production effect. Whereas if you say something about what you're observing, your short-term memory will hang on to those details much more vividly. The other thing that this can help prevent you from doing is from kind of getting into, I'm going to get bigger so we can have a little talk here. It's going to help you get from getting into what's called this rumination loop, where you just sort of notice a few things, boop, 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 again and again and again, right? If, as you're looking at this bird, you run out of things to say, very often that means that your brain has actually started to mind wander. So you're now starting to think about like, what will I eat when this is over? Like, or you start thinking about so many things. If you're not looking at the bird, you cannot do this. So the moment you kind of, your brain, your mouth stops saying things about what you're seeing, just kind of like, oh, that's a little moment of mind wandering. You just go back to the bird. If you see something, say something. And ideally, what you've going to do is just sort of have this stream of consciousness riff of blah 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 blah, all the things that you see about it. And at the end of that, what we're going to do is we're just going to pause for a moment and notice how much more information is stuffed into your head. This is really different than if you say, like, look at that bird. Well, everybody does it, kind of look at the bird. And sometimes we'll look at it until we can identify it. And then our brain goes, I don't need to look anymore. Right. So this is going to try to make your brain itch. You're looking so hard. You ready?
Okay, John, are we gonna let them unmute themselves, or they're just gonna talk in their room silently?
No, actually, everybody should be muted.
Should be muted, but do it in their rooms. Yeah, got it.
In your room, but what this actually doesn't work if you do it in your head. And you think like, I'll just think this. But the research on the production effect says it finds that we actually have to try it. Just try it. It will be weird. I guarantee you. It will feel wrong. It will feel weird, but it works. So actually, police officers on patrol are trained to do this. If they see something that they need to make a report about, they're trained to start just saying out loud whatever it is that you notice. Say it, say it, say it, say it, say it. They're driving along in their patrol car, kind of looking around on the streets. They're trained to start kind of just narrating the things that they're seeing going on. And their level of attention goes way up. If they're seeing things, then they need to make their body cam recording match the report of what they say. They start saying things out loud, and then their memory goes, you can do it too. We're going to try it. Here we go. And here's our bird.
You're muted.
Come on, John.
There you go.
It takes a village to keep me on track here. Thank you. So now just close your eyes and go back for a moment and think to yourself and try to recall those things that you said out loud and see how rich and how detailed and how specific all that information is. So just notice that. This technique is extremely powerful to increase your powers of observation. Again, technically it's called the production effect. So what you're doing is things have to come in through your eye, register in your brain. You then, in order for you to say it out loud, you have to have actually noticed that thing, picked it out from all the rest of the stuff. And then when you say it, blah, blah, you're hearing it, and you're also with your mouth motor making these noises. The work to do that is all you need to do is to have this little nugget more vividly in your short-term memory. Otherwise, what you do is you're just kind of looking at this and your brain is going to say like, yeah, I basically got this. Yep, I basically got this. I see it. It's got a yellow tummy and an eye ring. Yellow tummy. And then later on, I saw this yellow bird, right? But again, the specificity that you can do right now is because of the production effect. I do this when I'm sketching birds in the field. I'll look at the bird and I'll talk to the bird. The bird flies away, I can draw the bird. But if I don't talk to the bird flies away and I go like, I saw a bird with a yellow tummy. And that's the way our weird brains work. So that's that's a fun and useful tool. So let's look at another thing in your toolkit. Right. Oh, by the way, one last thing with this. You start doing this, what you're going to find is birds that you think you know, you're going to start to discover features about them that you'd never seen before. And what I want to do is invite you to, when you notice a new detail of an old friend, give yourself the same kind of dopamine happy dance that you give yourself when you see a new species. So if you can notice a new detail of a common bird that is as big a detail as seeing a species that you've never seen before. And when you start looking at the opportunities for birding this way, you get many more opportunities for dopamine. And if you actually celebrate, like, whoa, I've never seen this before. What happens when you start doing that, like, whoa, I've never seen this before. Your brain will go like, ooh, wow, we're happy, right? You go like, yes, we're happy. This is cool. We're celebrating. Your brain goes, okay, here's some dopamine. Right. So you're triggering your brain, you're giving you're signaling to your brain, give me more dopamine, make this whole sort of this nature observation experience something that we get, even more of a reward for. That dopamine helps you pay attention and focus. And so the more you do that, the more you do that. And that's a good thing. So another thing that happened during that is we got to hear this bird singing. Now, how many of us can describe the song that bird was singing?
I'm not sure if this is true for others, but I did not hear the audio come through with the video.
Oh dear.
But that may just be me, I'm not sure.
No, I didn't either.
Oh dear. Well, I'm going to go to that also must have made it awkward when it was doing.
I think when the bird videos, we couldn't hear the song.
Okay, well, then I am going to go to my audio settings and I'm just going to make sure that, because there's one coming up where I'm going to play some sound for you. And I'm going to computer make and it is it's telling me that it's gonna but a bunch of us did not hear the sounds. So I'm I'm sorry for that. This next thing where we're all going to listen to a sound, that won't work as well or at all. I'm going to join computer and joining. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to try one other button. And we'll see if the next time that a video comes around, we'll check to see if we have audio coming around on that. One more thing, the audio button. All right. We'll see on this next one how well that works. But so here's what I do with birdsong. When I first started trying to do birding by ear, I would say to myself, I got myself this tape of bird songs of California, and I'd drive around with it in my car, and I'd be listening like number 47, American redstart, go jeep, 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 number 48, and then it was out of context, and you just hear something. And, I found I got pretty good at identifying those songs if somebody in a loud voice announced the bird before I listened to it. But when I'd be out in the field, nobody was doing that. There wasn't somebody going number 47. And so what I found really helped was I would, and if currently, if you are not muted and you don't want me to hear you, you might want to hit that mute button, because I think a few of us are not muted. So here's a strategy for having more fun with birdsong. Getting them all at once is tough. But what I want to encourage you to do is, around the place where you live, learn 3 bird songs, learn 3 common bird songs. So when you go outside and you hear a bird, listen and try to think of like, okay, I'm going to learn that one, I'm going to learn that one, and I'm going to learn that one. Don't worry about getting them all. If you can get 3 common ones where you live, then what's going to happen is you're going to find that when you're walking around, those bird songs are going to pop out of the landscape around you. You'll be walking along, you're like, whoa, that's one of my birds. And at the start, you don't even have to know who it is, because what's going to happen is eventually you're going to see the bird making that noise. And you're like, oh, bird number 2 is the American robin. Oh, right. And then you're going to have that one for the rest of your life. And so when my parents were young, they would, in the morning, lie in bed together snuggling, and they would have their windows open in San Francisco. And there was this bird song that would come through the window, and they called it the Stanyan Street Nightingale. They lived on Stanyan Street. They didn't know what bird it was, but for the longest time, that was the Stanyan Street Nightingale. And then one day when my dad got into birding, he was walking along and he heard the Stanyan Street Nightingale, and he looked up, and there was a white-crowned sparrow singing. And from that point on, everybody knew the white-crowned sparrow. That's the Stanyan Street Nightingale. So you can do this too. And so start with 3, and then what you're going to find is that the acoustic environment gets simpler around you. It's not just all this noise. Those 3 birds will sound distinctly different than everybody else. There's another strategy that I use for for learning birdsong, and I call this to transcribe the birdsong, and it's a way of writing down the birds that I hear, and I want to show you how this works. First, let me see, I've made a few under the hood changes, and we're going to see if people can now hear these the audio on this recording. Let's give this a try. Cross your fingers, because otherwise the demonstration on learning the birdsong won't be quite as useful. Ready? Here we go. Here we go. Fingers crossed. Did that come through? No. Nope, 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 and nope. Okay. So, all right, now bird. So that bird's not going to sing for us. There's a share on there's a share about it. So that's, yeah. Oops, not that button. Yeah, I'm not seeing any. So somebody says that there is a Cam. Try reshaping your screen. No. Share audio. I think that what I'm going to have to do is just show you this technique without without any bird song. So you're going to imagine a bird song, and that was a white-throated sparrow that was going. And so what sometimes people will onomatopoetically kind of put words to these things. So and then sometimes, you know, people, when they hear a mountain chickadee, they only hear cheeseburger, right? So so rather than learning somebody else's way of putting words to it, here is a strategy that works really well. What you do is you get yourself a notebook, and you first I'm going to show you with my hand. So as I listen to the bird, what I do is I imagine I am a bird conductor with my hands, and I listen to it. I often close my eyes. When you close your eyes, more of your brain will go to pay attention to what you're listening, because you're not distracted by it. So you actually hear better with your eyes closed. And I'll orchestrate it like this. So it goes, I will with my hands go sort of swoop, then higher, do. So I'll listen to it a few times, and I'll try to get my hands to do what it does. So do.
Do you want glasses like that fall off?
Yeah, those are kind of cool. They're magnet. They're
They are magnets, but I can hear you.
Oh.
But here's what you're doing. You're do boop 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 boop. So I'm orchestrating. I'm doing it with my hands. So I'm kinesthetically getting that motion, and then I transfer this motion to a piece of paper. So higher notes, my hand goes higher. Lower notes, I go to another. If there's a trill, I do this. If there's buzz, I kind of do that, right? And so I do it with my hands, and then I put it down on the piece of paper. And when I put it down on the piece of paper, it looks like this. So I might go do D D D D D D D. Right, and let's zoom down on that. Right, and so it's not exactly a sonogram, but it's the same idea of a sonogram. Sort of longer notes will be a longer stroke. So if you're doing the ABCs, you do 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 do, right? So you're going up and down with it. So you make your little notes, and then I write over it, you know, might be la, T, B, 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 B. You know, once somebody says, oh, it says it's old Sam Peabody, you can't hear anything but that. But if you are doing it yourself, you're going to come up with your own little babble, your little sort of baby babble for it. If it's louder, like these two are like da, D, like I'm going to make that a bigger note, right? Do, D, B, 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 B. And then I will also, I will kind of think about the quality of it. It's slow, it's relaxed. Whistle. It's from mid canopy. So I'm describing sort of where it is. You know, others I might describe as buzzy. Others I might kind of like fast, chattery. You know, you hear a little wren, right? Different birds have different sort of things, but I will kind of just write it out for myself. Now, the way I write it out is going to be different than the way that you will write it out, right? But your transcription of that song will work really well for you. And then, you know, this is, you know, this will be bird number 1. And maybe you don't know who sang this. But what you then try to do is you try to walk around in the forest and notice the next time you see this. So actually writing it down is going to help you kind of get the first of your birds. So this is a really, really useful strategy to help you be able to make the most of listening to birds. Another thing that's really useful is that now we have these Merlin apps on everybody's phone, and you hear some bird that is up there. What I actually encourage you to do is to do your own transcription of the bird first. And then, because there's part of your brain that once you have the answer, it shuts down. But if you lead with a paying attention to the sound, then you can pull out your little Merlin app and hold it up, and it'll say like, these are the 5 birds that are singing, and it'll make a little buzz mark every time your bird is singing. You're like, oh, you're this bird. It does a remarkably good job of identifying birds by sound. I don't think there's anything wrong with using the Merlin app. And then you learn the ones who are around you. But writing your own bird songs is absolute gold for getting an ear that is trained to the forest that you live in. I want to encourage you, if your sort of sight idea is getting better, to start playing with that. You don't need to get all the birds in the Sierra Nevada. Get 3 local ones. And once, like, the first 3 are free, right? And then once you get those, you'll be jonesing for the next. And then they come naturally. But write them down, and you're going to find that you're like, oh, that's the Nashville warbler. And it's a lot of fun. Another thing that you can pay attention to is the stories that are happening when you see the bird. So when a bird pops up, what you want to do is say to yourself, what is happening here? There's a larger context. There is, sometimes you look out and you sort of see a specific story, like this bird attacked this bird and it ate this bird. You see them doing something. You see some specific hunting behavior. But sometimes you'll get this tiny little window this tiny little window of a bird's behavior. And what you want to do when you see a bird is to start to not just think about what the bird is, but what is it doing in this place, in this time? What is the context of what's going on? So ask yourself, what is this behavior for? Am I noticing it do the same thing several times? Ooh, there's a stereotyped behavior. I can pay attention to that and I can learn something about this. There's a bunch of great books that are out right now. I want to encourage everybody to run out and get yourself What It's Like to Be a Bird by our buddy Sibley. So much fun. So much fun. His Guide to Bird Life and Behavior is also really useful. And another one that I've had for years, it's kind of a dense, kind of a fire hose delivery of information, but the Birder's Handbook goes bird by bird, and you can read accounts of the behaviors of all sorts of different birds. And then you can like, oh, that may be what I was seeing. So try to figure out what they're doing. How are they interacting with each other? And then it goes from, realize that just identifying birds is the shallow end of the pool. There's so much going on. There's so much going on. So we can be listening, we can be looking at what they do and discovering all these sorts of things. So when you see a bird on a branch and it's not doing anything, it's doing something. What it's doing is not doing anything right now. And that's actually significant. But if it does something, it's doing something also. So just realize that all the things you see are the behavior. And another thing that helps is just to have a little bit of patience. If you wait, very often a story will come. And the more that you pay attention to your local birds, the more you can figure out their stories and the things that are happening around them. So let's take a look at this bird here. And behavior-wise, you might say, like, what is this bird doing? Fortunately, you can't hear it. Every once in a while, it's singing. There. All right. But let's just look at what it does. So like, oh, there was an underwing scratch. A couple of times when it's been singing, it's been kind of tucking its head back in. Is that a thing? Yeah, see, it just did it again. So like, what?
We're hearing it this time.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I don't know if you can turn your sound up a little bit for it, but this time I hear it.
That time it didn't pull its head back. Oh, look at that tail bump. Look at that tail bump. Womp, 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 womp. So is it going up and down with the same speed? All right, or is it up slower and down, up fast and down slow, or up slow and down fast? Let's see for the next tail pump. Is there an angle? Oh, look at that. Look at that. All right, so what you want to realize is that every time you see a bird doing something, the bird is doing something. And this is really significant. What are those things? What are those actions? And we want to pay attention to all of those factors as well. Where is it singing from? Are there any behaviors? All that sort of stuff adds to the joy and the fun we have when we're birding. Another thing that we can do when we're birding is we can contribute to citizen science. So when you, there are lots of different ways to get involved with scientific investigations of birds. If, for instance, you have the eBird app on your phone and you use that to keep track of what you're seeing, where you're seeing it, you are actually part of a citizen science movement, because these apps are not just for keeping track of your personal life list. When you're saying, I'm out in this place and I'm seeing this individual bird, that goes into a international database of bird observations. And it gives us real-time data on what is happening where. And these sorts of details of the lives of birds are really, really important for people who, as scientists, are working to protect bird populations and species. So scientists like the folks at Point Blue Conservation Science, they are constantly using real data to understand where these bird populations are. What parts of the habitat are they using? When are they using this? So take a look at the map here, right? What you're about to see is actual data collected by birders just like us from everybody's phones. And what they did is they then amalgamated that together. And what we get is a picture over time of what is happening with these bird populations. I'm going to make myself disappear. Here we go. Whoops, not you. We want there. All right. So here is the population of these little Wilson's warblers. So check this out. As April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, April, May, June. So you see, as the season goes on, there is this tide of birds that come north and turn and go south. So when we get involved collecting that information, we are helping with bird conservation. So it's not just about, one of these apps is not just about your own personal life list. We're helping land managers really make these sorts of decisions. Like, look at that weird population on the southern migration. There's this collection of Wilson's warblers out there in the Midwest. It looks like it's in the Rockies. Is that what's going on? Like, what's going on with that? So what we can do is, by looking at these patterns, we can figure out what areas are really important to the birds and make sure that we are protecting and preserving these habitats. There are lots of ways to get involved. A couple of apps that you might want to take a look at. There are ones that allow you to, there's something called the Journey North, looking at hummingbirds. Nest Watch is another fun. eBird, we're seeing here. iNaturalist is another. But I want to encourage you to share your nature observations with the larger scientific community. And together we can make a huge difference. So Lauren is saying, yeah, that Feeder Watch is a way that you can get involved right now. So Project Feeder Watch is a great example of a citizen science project where you can actually from home record information about movements of these bird populations. It's beautiful, and so you can be part of this larger community. The final thing that I want to suggest to you is the power of keeping a journal, keeping a notebook of your bird observations. Wherever you go, you see something going on with birds, and to write it down, to put it down in your journal. If you are looking at if you're a dyslexic like me, for me, I have a hard time writing. So my journals have lots of pictures in them. Other people, they have more writing in them. Other people, they're really interested in numbers, and there's lots of lists. All of these are good ways of recording information about birds. And what I want to encourage people to do is just to play around with those. Don't think to yourself, like, if I'm going to keep a notebook, I have to be an Audubon style artist. No, not at all. The drawings are a useful way of recording information. So are words, so are numbers. All of those are good. What I encourage people to do is to start practicing and playing with all of them. And then what you're going to find is that as time goes on, you're going to get better at sketching. You're going to get better at taking notes. I want to show you a couple of little strategies that you might use to help you with those notes on paper. Just to have a little have a little notebook that you can kind of keep with you, or some people will carry a larger notebook with them. Carry a notebook that is as large as you will realistically regularly bring with you in the field. If you want to get into drawing birds, you might need one that's a little bit larger. And I do have some resources online about drawing birds. I'm just going to do a really kind of quick demo of some strategies for taking some field notes that you might kind of like, oh, I might want to use that strategy. Let's just take a look at this. And then what I'd love to do is just kind of turn that over. Let's have a conversation. Are there any ideas that you saw here that personally resonated with you as things that you might want to incorporate into your own process of going out there birding that would make it even richer? And again, I'm not saying that, like, if you're not doing these things, you're doing it the wrong way. But I am saying that here are a bunch of strategies that perhaps can add even more richness to our experience when we're out there. Let me show you a strategy or two with getting stuff down on paper. Let's start with just sort of thinking about keeping lists of things. So if you are out there and you are seeing a bunch of birds, what you're seeing, where you're seeing it, when you're seeing it, how many of them, all of these are really, really useful things. So very often what I'll do at the start of a set of observations, I'll write where I am. So this might be Golden Gate Park. And I'll write when this is. And let's see, this will be on my birthday. And we'll call that this year. So there I am. I'm going out. What I've done here is, I call this just a little bit of metadata. Where am I? When is it? If you have a photograph of a bird, it's just a photograph of a bird. But if it's date stamped and geo-referenced, it's actually scientific data. So, and then let's say it started off kind of a cloudy, sort of foggy morning, but every once in a while the sun would poke through. I will sometimes give myself a little weather icon. And I could write that in, but sometimes I just like drawing clouds and sun, so that's fun. So there's just a sort of a useful anchor. And now I walk out in the park, and there's some robins feeding on the lawn. One thing I can do is I might just start a running list of who I'm seeing. So I can write there's an American robin. And I will often abbreviate it with a 4-letter code. And so what I do is, if there's two words, American robin, I put the first two letters of the first two, the first two letters of the first word, the first two letters of the next one. If there's just one word, like a killdeer, I'll write it's a kill. That looks a little bit odd. If there's a ruby crown kinglet, it's a ruby crown. This is very much like the bird banding codes. that bird watchers will use when they're kind of recording these. They have these 4-letter codes. There are a few species where they kind of meet, like, a black-throated gray warbler and a black-throated green warbler would have the same. And bird watchers, bird banders will memorize what they're going to do in those instances. But this works for just about everything that you're seeing. And then so I can keep a list of who I see really quickly with this way. And then I'll also keep a count of how many birds I see. So one way of doing this is just with tally marks. Let's say there are 3 killdeer. I can do that, and we've all seen tally marks done this way before. But let me show you a better way of doing it. This is a technique that foresters came up with, and it's really slick. It's the dot line method of keeping counts of things. So for the first robin that they see, they put down a dot. The second robin is a dot. Third robin and fourth robin, they're all dots. So dot, 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 dot. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Then fifth robin shows up, you do a line. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. Every 10 birds is a box with an X through it. If we see 23 more robins, this ends up being a much more compact way of keeping tallies and lists of things than the hatch marks like this, than the tally marks. And it's also easy to kind of quickly scan across it and go like, oh, 33 birds. Yeah. And how many kinglets? Oh, unfortunately, there's only 1 there. Oh, look, there's another. So I can also describe sounds that I hear, but I will also describe birds and their behaviors. So if I look over and there's a sort of thrushy looking thing, and it is bobbing its tail up and down, then I will often make a little sketch of that and show it. Now, these drawings do not need to be pretty. This is really important. Some people think that, I can put sketches in if I'm a bird artist. But if I notice that the tail is bobbing, I can have a really kind of simple bird. And I can show that the tail is going up and down. And then I will write next to that, that keeps breaking, tail bobbing. And let's say I remember that there were stripes on the head and streaks on the breast, but I don't remember exactly where they were. I can just go like this: stripes, streaks, dark, pale yellowish, and smaller than a robin. So what I'm doing here is I am adding in some visual notes. It doesn't have to be a pretty picture. I don't have to know who it is. This can be mystery bird number 1. But by keeping track of these sorts of observations, I'm going to become a better birder. If I, get a good look at something, like let's say there was that bird with the yellow chest that we saw at the very beginning of this talk. If I just looked at it, a lot of the details would not stick with me. But because I looked at it and spoke stuff out loud, a bunch of those details are still with me in my brain. And so what I'm going to do is just a little memory sketch, but I know that there are going to be things that are wrong with that memory sketch, and I have to be okay with that. When I'm drawing like this, it's not like drawing from a photograph. These are field notes. And so I know that there will be stuff that doesn't work. On my website, I've got a bunch of pages where I kind of talk about drawing kind of some of my first basic lines for drawing birds. I've drawn a lot of birds, and that really helps me. This is not a course in drawing birds, but what I want to do here is just sort of show that if I do talk to these birds, then I can get more stuff sticking in my head. So let's see, I'm remembering that this bird had a big yellow spot in front of its eye. It had a big eye ring. There was black going up onto the head and kind of a black mask around the edge of a yellow throat. There were stripes going down in the top of the chest. It had a bicolored bill that was more orange on the bottom and darker on the top. Sort of a darker back, but there were black spots up on the top of its head. The wing was all a monotone color. It had white here, it had yellow here, it had yellow here, it had gray here, and it had orange legs. So I will often do a little sketch with notes on it, and then when I can go over that with a pen. Now, I have drawn a lot of birds. So this is going to be, part of what happens when you draw more birds is it makes the next bird easier to draw, right? So I have a memory of some of the bird basics in my head. Get some of this bird down. And if you're interested in learning more about birds, on my website, I have a bunch of resources to help you do that. Don't start with warblers. They'll drive you crazy. Start with ducks and start with herons that hold still. So making drawings is one tool. Using words to describe things is another. Keeping counts of what you see is another thing. Having the metadata, all of these are things that you can put into your notes. And all of those just force us to slow down, pay a little bit closer attention to what we're seeing. And when we do that, we might have the opportunity to encounter a detail about this bird that we hadn't seen before, to remember something more vividly than we otherwise would, and to give ourselves just a little bit more time to fall in love with the natural world around us. The more we do this, the more the world opens up to us. Going out and birding is such an open-ended, delightful thing to do. You go out and each adventure will offer new things to you. I just want to encourage people to think of the wide variety of things that we can do to make that experience even richer for us. Connecting with your local Audubon group is a fantastic way to make these birding adventures even richer, because you get out there with a group of other nature nerds. It's just so much fun. It can be just a celebration of biodiversity together. And together, when we go out on these field trips, what you also want to do is to make connections with other people. Learn the people, meet strangers, meet somebody else from your area who's also interested in birds. This is fun for several reasons. One, we're just a social species, and getting to meet people who you can geek out with is an absolute delight. But the other is there are times that come when we need to work together to protect the natural places and spaces and species that are around us. And the more that we've kind of met socially and gone out and celebrated these birds together, the stronger the relationships between us, the more effective we are in working together for conservation and preservation and protection of these wild places and species. So when we're going out, we're connecting with the other nature nerds in your local Audubon chapter, we are making ourselves a more effective community for conservation and preservation and stewardship. So the final thing that we can do to make our birding better is to get involved in this larger community of stewards who are working to protect and preserve the world around us, so that some of this biodiversity will also be there for our great-grandchildren to respect and appreciate. And when they do, they will look back at people in the past who were wise enough, in spite of all the demands on us, to do the work together to protect and preserve these things. We are at a critical point on the planet right now, and the choices we make a big difference. And I want to invite you to connect with your local chapter and see what you can do together to go out and celebrate and discover, and also work to protect the natural world around you. I'm really honored to have been invited to come and talk to all of you today. And so let's now turn it over to a larger discussion. If there are people here in the meeting tonight who have thoughts and ideas about some of these ideas or other things that you can do to make your own process of being a nature nerd and naturalizing even richer, I would love to hear from any of you. And also just want to, encourage people to connect with your local chapters and conservation groups, such as Point Blue Conservation Science, places where scientists are working to protect and preserve these species. If you're going to be joining us out on in the Central Valley on Sunday to go celebrate some cranes, please join us. Bring a potluck treat to share, and there also will be a scientist from Point Blue with us who we'll be geeking out with and celebrating some things. So what I'm going to do is, I'm on my computer, I'm going to bounce over to my gallery view so I can see everybody. And if you have a thought or idea that you'd like to share, I want to encourage you either just to raise your hand like this, and we'll know that you've got an idea to share. And you can also use the raise hand function, and then we'll know that you want to speak, and we'll try to go one at a time.